One thing that can hold you back when you're starting a new exercise routine, especially one that involves doing any type of plank or push-up, is wrist or forearm pain. This is something I see a lot in my practice and something that is actually quite easily fixed. When you start a new exercise routine that involves putting weight through your hands, the load is a big change for a smaller area and little tiny small bones that might not be used to taking loading, where your wrists are used to working on a computer or driving. Taking your body weight and putting it into the wrists is a lot more stress than this area is used to. So what I'd like to say to people is that give it a little bit of time, because sometimes it's just an adaptation phase of this area getting stronger. You can imagine if you'd never walked on your feet before, that it would probably feel like a bit of a strain to your foot if your whole body weight was going through it. And that's the same thing that we see with the wrists. Nevertheless, there are some really healthy habits we can do to keep this area of the body healthy. Let's talk about the anatomy of the wrist and forearm first. So you've got long bones in your hands and then smaller bones that make up the joints of your finger. And then in your wrist, there's 8 little bones. And I kind of think of these as little marbles, like they're very tiny. There's 2 rows of 4. And these little bones in your wrist are supported by the ligaments from the muscles upper part of your forearm. So basically the muscles are here and then the ligaments come across the front and the back, and this is what holds these bones in place. And vice versa, what usually pulls these bones out of place or causes a little bit of sharpness and pain, especially when you bring your wrist into extension, is if these ligaments are pulling too tight on either side. In your forearm, you've got 2 bones, the radius, which is always on the thumb side, and the ulna, which is always on your pinky finger side. I like to start out in the hand, and for many of the videos that I'm going to offer, we're going to be rolling with a ball. We're going to do a little bit in the forearm, but the hand actually is so tiny that it's good to use your other hand. And what I like to do is just move my thumb firmly inside each bone. So you can get between the bones of your hand and the muscles and get your finger in there. And these little tiny muscles do a lot of work. So I would recommend doing both hands and really getting in between each bone with a firm pressure, going from your wrist out to your fingers. And if you find a little tender spot, maybe massage around it. Probably a tender spot would be about the size of a pea. So you just want to kind of massage into that area. And I would recommend doing both hands the same. You will likely find more sensitive areas around your thumb, because your thumb has a big impact on grip. And so it tends to have a lot of muscular trigger points in here, which, funny enough, there's a lot of medicine that revolves around releasing points in the hand to fix other areas of your body. Moving on to the carpal bones in the wrist, as I said, there's 8 of them, and they are really governed by the stability of the ligaments on either side. So to affect these carpal bones, we're gonna first affect the muscles of the forearm, taking some stretches to release any tightness. So let's take our wrists forward. So your fingertips will be facing your knees, your wrists will be forward, and we're just gonna lean back. So continue to press the heel of your hand into the earth, spread and lengthen your fingers, and then pulling your hips back as much as you can, and you should start to feel a little bit of a stretch, especially down near the hand at the wrist. And if you want to add a little bit more depth, you can actually bend your elbows back towards your knees, and this will stretch a little bit further, especially where it connects to the carpal bones in the wrists. We'll hold this for 3, for 2, and 1, and then come out gently and just give your wrists a little roll and release. You may feel some sensation along, especially where the bottom of your forearm is. And then we'll take the hands the opposite way. So now the dorsal side of the hand, or the finger nail side of the hand, is going to be on the ground, and then we're going to pull back. This one you don't want to put as much weight in your wrist, because this isn't the typical stability position for the wrist. You would never take a plank with your hands in this position. So we're not going to put too much weight into the wrist here. Just pulling the hips back, anchoring the hand down on the ground, pressing the fingernails in, and we'll hold it for 3, for 2, and 1. And then give that a little release. And again, sensation is normal. We just put a little pressure through the wrist. We just worked through the forearms. Now we're gonna take a release for the carpal bones. And this is something that I love to do when my wrists are sore. And we can make it less intense or more intense, and we're gonna start with the less intense variation. So let's take the left knee and anchor it, and we'll place the right foot on the floor. You're gonna lift up a little bit and take your right wrist and place it right behind your right knee. Then we'll place the right foot on the floor and start to squeeze the wrist behind the knee. So you really want where those carpal bones live to be behind the knee. It's normal if the fingertips curl a little bit because you're pressing on the tendons that make your fingers flex. And it's also normal if your hand goes a little bit white because we are cutting off a bit of blood supply. If you want to intensify, you're going to scoot in just a little bit closer so there's more pressure going into that wrist. We're just going to hold this for a few seconds. And then scoot back to release it and move your wrist around. You might find a little click here and there because the carpal bones are moving back into place. So let's take it on the other side. Again, you're gonna bend your right knee, plant your left foot, take your left wrist right behind your left knee, and then scooch in as much as you can handle, getting pressure in this wrist from behind the knee. This is also great for the top of the calf and the bottom of the hamstring on this leg too. So kind of getting more for your effort. Good, and we'll hold this for 3, for 2, and 1. And then give that a little release. I want to show you the more intense variation getting both of them at the same time, but it is kind of a little bit of a Cirque du Soleil move also, because what we're going to do is take a little squat, take both of your wrists in at the same time, and sit down. So again, you're gonna get double action at the same time, which is great. I feel like because there's no weight on the ground, you're gonna get a little bit more pressure in the squat and behind the wrists, but it's not for everyone and it's difficult to get in, so you can decide if this is what works for you. And let's release that. For this next forearm release, I'm going to need a ball. The force is strong with me. All right, let's come to our knees again. And actually you can sit right down almost in a child's pose. You wanna get nice and low to the ground. We're gonna place the ball on the floor and we're gonna target kind of the fattest area of muscle in the belly of the forearm. So take one forearm to the floor and take the other one and start rolling your forearm on a ball. Try and relax your hand. There's not a ton of surface area here, so you really wanna just focus on finding a tender spot and then leaning into it and relaxing your shoulders around it, relaxing your arm, and then just moving around, screening for another spot. I also like to work along the ulnar bone. There's usually a lot of trigger points along there, so that's again the pinky side, and then finding a sore spot and leaning into it. And with all of our trigger points, we're using really good breath work around when you find a sore spot to release the activation of that point. Pain and chronicity of pain has a lot to do with the nervous system and sensitizing around pain, meaning your body is actually more receptive to pain, not desensitized. So we actually need to breathe around it and start to create a different motor pattern here. After doing the front of the forearm, you can turn to the back. There's even less meat on the back of the forearm, so just be careful that you're not squishing your bones too much, that we're really getting into muscular spots. And with rolling, you would obviously do both arms, even if you're only symptomatic in one arm, because it's important that we kind of scan and find what's going on in both arms. And it's also going to affect the nervous system and the brain, so we always want to do both sides. Front, back, right, and left. And you can take as long as you want with the ball. Just be careful around your bones because there's not a lot of cushioning around there. We don't want to cause any bruising. We're gonna come down to our backs now to do a little bit more carpal bone release, because this really is the heart of the wrist and usually what causes people pain when putting weight through the hands. So let's come down to the back, Keep your knees bent as you move to your back because this allows more space for the back and usually provides a little bit of lumbar release as you come down. We're gonna take the palms together and put them right underneath your sacrum. So you kind of wanna find the midline and then the lowest part of your spine, which is your sacrum, and put the weight of your pelvis onto your hands. Now from here, you can decide if you wanna straighten your legs, which will put a little bit more weight into the wrists, and relax your chest. Allow the weight of the pelvis to press into your wrists. Allow your arms to be heavy on the ground, chest to remain open, face and jaw relaxed. And if you choose to put a little bit more weight through your hands, you could bring your knees into tabletop just so that the stacking of the femurs puts some more weight into the wrists. You can lean your knees to one side, putting more weight in the wrist on the same side that your knees are going on, or the other side. So massaging of the carpal bones just helps them find their right placement in the wrist. Let's take the feet down and we're just gonna switch. So we're gonna place the palms up. This time you're gonna need to roll your shoulders underneath a little bit to get the arms in the right place, and then take the hips back down on top of the wrists. Same thing, you can straighten your legs to bring a little more weight into the wrists, or bring the knees up to tabletop to put a little bit more weight there. One more option if you'd like is to really bring your elbows underneath you, get your sacrum right on top of your wrists, and lift up your chest a little bit, which will also put a bit more weight into the wrists from the weight of your chest lifting up and directing more weight into the pelvis. Let's take it all the way down. Remove your wrists out. And one more little trick is that you could do the knee squish on your back. Anything to get a little bit of pressure into those carpal bones, into the forearms. It's incredibly relieving. And then release. Let's finish off by just taking that same massage technique that we did in the hands and going vertically from your elbow all the way down to the wrist. So you can take that firm pressure with your thumb and moving the thumb all the way to the wrist. It's kind of interesting to watch how your fingers will move too because of the tendons involved in the forearm. Taking a little bit more time on areas where you find a tender spot. I would do this on the front and back, right and left arms. And at the end of the day, it's nice to give your fingers a little stretch as well. So you can basket weave your fingers, press them away from you, maybe lift them over your head to create a little more space, and release. We work with our hands and our wrists and our forearms on a daily basis in everything we do, especially typing on a phone or computer. So these are some great techniques to help you keep your wrists and forearms healthy.